Qin Shi Huang, Yingzheng or Qin Shi Huang of the Qin dynasty, became a king at 13 when his father died. His time was kind of a chaotic dynasty because there were 6 other states that were constantly battling it out for world domination. When he became an adult, Qin Shi Huang said, "Okay, I'm about to make peace with the entire China, but for there to be order, there must be war," and battled everyone in an act called Qin's Wars of Unification. After years of rampaging all throughout China for the sake of peace, he got there. Now Qin Shi Huang wanted to be the ruler of rulers, the best of the best, so he made coins, weights, and measurements and made them the norm so traders won't have a hard time. Oh, this and this and this were also made during his time. But if there was anything that was truly memorable about the Qin dynasty that we could physically see today, it's this Great Wall in China, called Great Wall of China, to protect his kingdom from the Mongols. He did a lot of things, really, but Qin Shi Huang wasn't the kind of person to give up his throne even after dying. He was so scared of the inevitable finish line of all humans that he looked for ways to be immortal. He thought if he became immortal, all the sacrifices he made wouldn't go to waste. Yeah, because who could possibly ruin his hard work after he dies? Well, Father Time was something he couldn't beat, so what he did instead was prepare for what's next after death. Qin Shi Huang believed that he'd still need his power in the afterlife for his safety, and this is where the wild purchase started. He commissioned a tomb complex that would represent his empire in his next life. About 700,000 workers constructed this tomb of his for decades. It doesn't even look like a tomb. It's like an underground version of his kingdom. Like it was legit built with palaces, towers, and treasures that mirrored his rule on the surface. The most famous part of this museum-turned-casket-turned-mausoleum is this: the Terracotta Army. His next life squad had around 8,000 soldiers, with 600 horses and 100 chariots, all positioned as if they were in a battle. Every one of them had different facial features, hairstyles, and face demeanors. But since they're Chinese, you probably won't be able to tell one from the other had they not been wearing clothes that show their ranks. When Qin Shi Huang died in 210 BC, he was buried somewhere in there. I said somewhere because, up to now, we haven't found it yet. Only his Terracotta Army was discovered by farmers in 1974 when they were building a well. For a rich person, this was a reasonable buy, so I think Qin Shi Huang's bigger-than-a-city tomb should belong in C tier. Wild, but not completely wild for his time. I mean, have you seen the pyramids? Have you seen the Taj Mahal? It just so happened that Qin Shi Huang's was at a much larger scale. Peter Widener. It was the late 1800s. This guy, Peter Errol Brown Widener, was one of the richest in America at that time, and he got it from taking advantage of the streetcar industry. And if there's anything common about rich people then and now, their definition of big was different from us peasants. He built his mansion in Elkins Park, Philadelphia. That place is like Los Altos, or Beverly Hills, or Billionaires' Row in New York. Peter hired this architect named Horace Trumbauer to design his house because Horace was known to make houses he couldn't afford. Pete called this house the Linwood Hall, and it took 3 years to finish. Why did it take so long, you might ask? Well, it's a rich person's house. That's the short answer. The long answer is because the Linwood Hall itself covers more than 1.5 acres in floor area, just the house. 6,500 square meters to be exact. This humble abode of his had 110 rooms, which begs the question, why? It's not like he had to house 10 families he didn't have. He only had 2 wives. One does not simply build a house with more than 100 rooms, but when someone does, we don't know the purpose. Just look at this. It's something we will never have, but we'd be absurd if we actually had it. This is my best impression of a real estate agent trying to sell you this house. Inside this house, you'll see this art gallery that was there to flaunt his art collection from people like Raphael, Rembrandt, and El Greco. Outside of this massive room is an even bigger ballroom that can hold up to 1,000 guests. Perfect if you have that many friends ready to say yes to everything you say because you're rich. There was also a swimming pool inside the house. Back then, it was a rarity, even for the likes of rich people. Outside this mansion, well, it's 300 acres of garden. Yep, 300 acres of green. When it was made, it took Peter about $8 million, which if we convert to today's money, is $200 million. These are the times when we get to ask why build such a massive estate, but we damn wish we had that money to build it too. I find it so mid too. C tier. Jesus Christ, let's get to the wild ones. A lunch. When you're out eating, how much do you normally spend? $40? $70? $500 if you're feeling wealthy? In 2013, Apple's CEO Tim Cook joined in an auction to raise money for Robert F. Kennedy's shindig. He was the item to be sold. Well, not technically him, but an experience with him since you get to have a 1-hour coffee chat with Timmy inside Apple's headquarters. Charity Buzz started this auction with a starting value of $50,000. $50,000 is enough to feed me for as long as it could, and it was just the starting. Ridiculously expensive is an understatement for this, as bidders put the price up and up and up for this thing. Rich people battled it out with swords and shields, but mostly with money. 86 bids were placed during this session, and at the final bid reached $610,000. This level of meet and greet was something I wouldn't even dare to do. You know how much it took me to meet John Cena in real life? $40, and it was for gas. What's funny is $610,000 was also the highest bid ever made in the history of Charity Buzz at that time. The other one was for a Lamborghini Aventador Roadster. This one was for a lunch. They who won the auction didn't reveal their identity, which I understand. Having a representative in there was common if you didn't want to be discovered joining auctions and buying weird things at an absurd value. The anonymous winner was also allowed to bring a +1 with them. But the thing is, they needed to pay for their own travel and accommodation, and the meeting had to be done in 1 year after the auction closed. I wouldn't be too concerned about this if I was the winner. What is a $10,000 Airbnb and a private jet commute if I already scratched my ball pay $600,000 for a chat? Since Tim Cook is one busy man leading a multi-trillion-dollar company, the winner was not allowed to vlog about it, write anything about it, take pictures or whatever. And to make sure that everything was fine, they had to sign an NDA saying, "I promise to not give out information about everything we talked about after getting to the place." Good thing I didn't win that, because I'm never going to financially recover from it. Today, you could probably invite him to a podcast at 80% less price than that if you have enough subscribers. The main thing about this was it was a lunch that was more than $500,000. Nothing more. Whoever you are that won, you belong in the A tier. Dada Puge. This guy was known as the Gold Man of India. This guy was a businessman in Pune, and he went viral because he did something kinda nuts. He bought himself a solid gold shirt. Not kidding. The shirt cost him about $240,000, which is like a house in some places. So why did he do it? Basically, he loved gold. Like, really loved it. In India, gold is a big deal, a symbol of wealth and status. But Dada took it to a whole new level by turning himself into a walking treasure chest. Here's how it all went down. Dada had this shirt made by a jewelry company in his hometown, and it wasn't just slapped together. A team of 15 skilled goldsmiths worked on it for 16 days straight, doing 18-hour shifts. Talk about commitment. They used around 3.5 kilograms of 22-karat gold and turned it into tiny gold flowers, about 14,000 of them, that were sewn onto a velvet base. It even had 100,000 sparkly bits to make it look extra flashy. Just in case that wasn't enough, he added 6 Swarovski crystal buttons. I mean, why not? If you're going for flashy, might as well make it shining, shimmering, splendid. So Dada would wear this golden shirt to events, and people would stop and stare. He'd get tons of attention, which I guess was the whole point. It's not every day you see a guy decked out in head-to-toe gold. He started getting called the Gold Man, and he became a bit of a local celebrity. Some people thought it was cool, others thought it was, well, kinda ridiculous. But Dada didn't care. He was living his shiny dream. But that gold shirt of his was a massive target. In 2016, he was attacked and killed by 12 men. Apparently, it was over some money disputes. After his death, no one's quite sure what happened to the famous gold shirt. Some say it was sold off to cover debts. Others think his family still has it. But a gold shirt? Really? What are you, a SoundCloud rapper? Definitely A tier. Guinea Pig Armor. This is probably one of the times in your life where you're just, what in the Kung Fu Panda is this? Guinea Pig Armor. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Someone crafted an actual suit of armor, complete with tiny plates and chainmail, for a guinea pig. And not just any old, hey, this is a funny Halloween costume kind of thing. Nope. This was real, intricately designed armor. Imagine you're scrolling through eBay one day and you see a miniature armored suit for a guinea pig. Can I say it again? What in the Kung Fu Panda is this? And guess what? It sold for $24,300. Someone really took their time with this. This armor had every tiny detail you'd expect from a medieval knight's gear, just shrunk down to fit, a small rodent. It was made of chainmail and actual metal plates. There was even a little helmet involved. If you're wondering who needs to see a guinea pig in a helmet, well, probably no one. But hey, here we are. If you're wondering if the guinea pig could even move in this thing, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say probably not. Yeah, the poor guinea pig probably wasn't doing any battle rolls. Anyway, the suit was auctioned off on eBay in 2013, and people went nuts for it. Bidding went all the way up to $24,300 before someone finally snagged it. To be clear, that's enough to buy like a car, or cover a semester of college. Or just, not wasted on guinea pig armor. But hey, everyone's got their thing, I guess. The person who won the auction remains anonymous, which is probably smart, because if anyone knew who they were, they'd be roasted for eternity. I mean, they'd either be considered a legend or someone who just really needs better ways to spend their money. You're probably asking why anyone would even want this in the first place. The backstory? Some guy named Sean McCoy, who's apparently a graphic designer, thought it'd be hilarious to make a suit of armor for his guinea pig, Lucky. And yes, the guinea pig's name was Lucky, which is pretty fitting because the little guy got immortalized in chainmail. The armor was apparently created as a joke, but somehow it ended up in the great eBay universe, and, well, people just couldn't resist. Lucky's armor was designed to protect against, what? Tiny swords? Cat claws? The very concept of existential dread? I mean, let's be real. Lucky's biggest threats were probably some rogue lettuce leaves. And as for why it sold for so much, turns out this whole quirky animal accessory market is big with people who have too much cash to burn. You've got people out here buying diamond collars for their dogs, velvet thrones for their cats, and apparently now, medieval armor for guinea pigs. Gotta say though, guinea pig armor is kinda next level. It's not every day you see a pet that could pass for a Game of Thrones extra. If you're thinking of recreating this at home, here's a tip. Don't. Unless you're into painstaking detail work and have a lot of metal and chain lying around, this probably isn't the DIY project for you. Also, it's definitely not cheap. I mean, think about it. Actual metalsmithing is way above the standard glue gun and glitter level of crafting. And Lucky the guinea pig actually had to be okay with this whole ordeal. I'd give guinea pig armor an A-tier rating. It's not quite at the legendary S-tier because, let's face it, a $24,300 piece of guinea pig armor might be outrageous, but it's not entirely pointless. Think about it. You could put it in a glass case and make it a conversation piece for parties, or keep it as the weirdest heirloom ever. Or hell, maybe Lucky really needed that armor. Marilyn Monroe's chest. Xrays. Back in 2010, 3 Xrays of Marilyn Monroe's actual ribcage went up for auction, and someone forked over $45,000 for them. Let that sink in for a sec. Early 50 grand for a couple of old black and white scans that only a doctor could fully understand. But hey, they're Marilyn's, so I guess that makes them priceless. These Xrays came from a hospital visit Marilyn made in 1954 to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Florida. She'd gone in for endometriosis, which, in case you didn't know, is a condition that messes with the tissue in the uterus. It's painful and can seriously affect someone's quality of life. So, while she was in there dealing with this super real medical issue, they took chest X-rays, which were completely normal for the doctors. Little did anyone know, though, that these would eventually become some weird collector's item. And look, I get it. It's Marilyn Monroe. She's a legend. The fact that people still care about her, decades after her death, says a lot. But are chest X-rays the best way to keep her memory alive? Like, imagine explaining that purchase to someone. Oh yeah, that framed black and white picture on my wall? That's Marilyn Monroe's ribcage. Honestly, it feels less like honoring a star and more like collecting weird receipts of their existence. It's not like that's gonna get put up on OnlyFans. The X-rays show her sternum and ribs, the stuff that probably didn't get as much attention as, well, everything else about her. But somehow, these images hit the auction circuit and were brought up by someone who had the cash to burn. To put it into perspective, $45,000 could have gone to a car, a down payment on a house, or a solid year of college tuition. But nope, it went to images of Marilyn's insides. Personally, I'd give this a D tier. Well, it's a solid conversation starter. Like, I can imagine this rich person showing guests around and being like, see that? That's Marilyn Monroe's chest X-ray. You can't deny that's unique, but also, it's borderline creepy. John Lennon's Tooth. There are lots of things you could buy with money across the universe. A yellow submarine, a long and winding road, a blackbird, strawberry fields, and then John Lennon's tooth. Getting popped with 2 bullets on his back wasn't enough, I see. In 2011, a dentist in Canada bought one of John Lennon's molars for over $31,000. Just so we're clear, this wasn't some miracle cure molar or a magic Beatles fang with powers to make you a rock star overnight. It was a plain, old, yellowed molar that had been out of Lennon's mouth since the 1960s. Apparently, Lennon originally gave the molar to his housekeeper, Jarlett, back in the day. He was just like, hey, here's my tooth, . No real explanation, but she kept it. Maybe she thought it'd be worth something someday, or maybe she just didn't want to be rude. Who's to say? Fast forward a few decades and Dot's family decides to put it up for auction. They figured someone out there would want it, and they were right. Let it be! Oh my goodness! Now before you ask, Yes, the tooth was too fragile for any sort of DNA testing. So no, you're not going to be cloning John Lennon from this thing. The dentist, a guy named Dr. Michael Zuck, bought it because he's got a serious thing for famous teeth. Not kidding, he's also tried to buy Elvis's tooth and has even written books about celebrity teeth. If you're thinking that sounds kind of insane, you're not alone. But Dr. Zuck was absolutely pumped to get his hands on Lennon's molar, calling it the ultimate Beatles collectible. Gotta say, ultimate is a strong word here, even for a dentist. If you're wondering what he planned to do with it, brace yourself. Dr. Zuck actually talked about extracting DNA from the tooth to maybe, just maybe, clone John Lennon. Because who wouldn't want a mini Lennon clone running around? Well, this isn't possible. But I guess if you're the kind of person who's willing to drop $31,000 on a tooth, reality isn't exactly a priority. This guy did more than just stash the tooth away. He actually took it on a tooth tour, bringing it to dental schools and showing it off at events. Let's just pause to appreciate the idea of this man pulling out a molar at parties and saying, "Hey, check out this piece of John Lennon." It's a power move, for sure, but probably not the one I'd go for. I'd put this at a solid B tier. Here's why. On one hand, it's a tooth, which is pretty damn strange. But on the other hand, it's John Lennon's tooth, so it's got some cool factor. Lady Gaga. First off, she's apparently terrified of ghosts. Like, we're talking full-blown paranoia. To deal with this, she went out and spent $50,000 on an electromagnetic field meter. The whole idea here is that this EMF meter can supposedly detect ghostly energy around her. Guess she wasn't satisfied with just some lucky charm. Nah, she needed ghost-busting tech. And $50,000? That's not even ghost insurance. It's just a machine that beeps if it feels a presence. Then there's the teacup dress story. During her Monster Ball tour, she had this whole teacup-shaped dress thing going on, which was a statement, I guess. But apparently, this dress was trapping steam inside, making it, well, probably super uncomfortable. So what does Gaga do? She goes out and spends $52,000 to hire a NASA-trained chemist to find a solution to let steam out of her dress. 52 grand for a guy to say, "Okay, here's a vent." And then there's the handcrafted lace. Gaga once shelled out $19,000 on custom lace. Now, lace can look good and all, but if you're paying the same amount as a decently used car, maybe it's time to reconsider. But Gaga just casually spent that for her outfits, which, if you've seen her performances, are pretty wild. So, yeah, throw in some handmade lace for the unique look. At this point, it's probably no surprise that Lady Gaga also pays her staff to deal with some bizarre stuff. She reportedly hired a Ghostbuster team that costs thousands a year. Their job? Making sure there are no spirits hanging around her or her hotel rooms. You gotta respect the dedication, but imagine being that Ghostbuster. You're out there, just chilling, getting paid to wave a ghost meter around so Lady Gaga can sleep in peace. What a way to make passive income. Stephanie Germanotta bought some wild stuff for some wild prices, so of course it's gonna be S. Britney's chewing gum. I think this was Belle Delphine's bathwater, before Belle Delphine's bathwater. Back in 2004, someone actually paid $14,000 for a piece of gum that she supposedly spat out. Someone decided this chewed-up piece of minty or fruity residue was worth more than a decent car. This all took place in the early 2000s, which was prime time for Britney's fame. She was everywhere, on TV, in magazines, and all over music charts. Fans were obsessed with her, to the point where even the smallest bit of Britney memorabilia had serious value to some people. Someone got their hands on a piece of her gum after she'd finished with it and thought, why not try to sell it? They listed it on eBay, thinking maybe a few fans would be interested. But to everyone's surprise, it went for 14 grand. Now, there's no real way to confirm that this gum was actually hers. It's not like there was a certificate of authenticity or anything. The seller claimed it was Britney's gum, and people just went with it. Honestly, at that price, you'd hope there was some sort of proof. But fans were so into Britney that they probably didn't even care. They just wanted something, anything, that was hers. The buyer was willing to believe it was legit, even though the rest of us might have a few questions. Jackpot baby one more time. This piece of gum wasn't even a one-time thing. At the time, random Britney items were popping up on eBay a lot. People sold stuff they claimed she'd used or touched, hoping to make a quick buck off her fame. Some things were more believable, like signed posters or concert tickets. But then you had gum, and even some hair ties supposedly left behind by Britney. It was peak celebrity culture, where people thought anything a famous person had touched was valuable. You're going to A tier. They had that much money to buy Britney's gum, but didn't feel the need to verify if it was real? Yeah, I'm making a fortune out of this. Britney herself probably never knew about this sale. And honestly, she'd probably find it weird as hell if she did. It's not like she intentionally spat out her gum thinking it would be valuable. Someone just happened to pick it up and realize they could make money off it. It's one of those things where you wonder how people even get their hands on stuff like this. Steve Cohen. Steve is a hedge fund billionaire, and he bought a shark. Yeah, it's a massive dead shark. Back in the early 1990s, British artist Damien Hirst created this piece, officially named The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living. And if there's anything resembling the shark in the name, it's the length of it. Basically, it's a tiger shark suspended in a tank filled with formaldehyde. The idea was that it would confront viewers with thoughts about mortality by presenting a massive, preserved animal. So it's both art and biology in one, even if it's mostly just a big dead shark floating in a glass box. The original shark was caught specifically for this project in 1991 and was around 14 feet long. Hirst didn't catch it himself, but he paid a fisherman to get it. The fisherman snagged the tiger shark off the coast of Australia, and then it was shipped over to London to become part of the artwork. Hirst originally funded it with help from Charles Saatchi, an art collector who initially owned the piece. In 2004, Steve Cohen bought this shark artwork from Saatchi for somewhere between $8 million and $12 million. That price made it one of the most expensive pieces of contemporary art at the time. Some people thought it was a bold move and a serious investment, while others just thought he was throwing his money at a giant dead fish. The thing is, sharks don't preserve forever. The original shark started to decay and lose its form even with all the chemicals used to keep it intact. So, by the time Cohen bought it, the shark wasn't in great shape. It had to be replaced with a new tiger shark in 2006, basically making it the physical impossibility of death in the mind of someone living 2.0. Hirst got another shark, again from Australia, and preserved it in the same way, giving Cohen a refreshed version of the artwork. Unless you're a museum or a Japanese restaurant, buying a shark is, well, kinda cuckoo. I'll let you decide where the shark belongs in the ranking. If you want to buy things, go ahead. No one's stopping you, but the court of public opinion has eyes everywhere, especially on TikTok, ready to give you mixed reactions. But if you're happy with it, you're happy with it. See y'all.